All right, everyone. Leonel Moreno fucked around and he found out. Yes, ICE managed to nab him. He's that so-called influencer on TikTok that was making videos bragging about being illegally in the United States and all of the money that he was given by the government and how people could squat in properties that weren't currently physically occupied and how to do it. And I said the other day, the actual impact of that particular diatribe, really, it just moves people in the other direction. They realize that squatting is actually a systemic problem in some parts of the U.S., and so they look into the laws and say, oh shit, I think I might need to bring this up at the next town meeting. This could become a problem real quick because of the Biden border crisis. Florida acting just the other day, removing the prohibition on removing squatters physically, etc., etc. He fucked around and found out, first and foremost, if you're on shit talk, you're not really an influencer. The sort of audience that you're going to garner there probably, by and large, they're not going to be attempting squatting. A lot of them are tweens anyway, so it's going to have a limited impact. Also, half of your engagement is probably bots anyway still at this point. Secondly, you're openly bragging to be illegally in the country and that you're bilking people out of taxpayer money. Then you have to flee because, of course, you realize immigration authorities are actually after you. Now, here's the funny part. The Biden administration, by and large, is not interested in nabbing illegal aliens in the United States. Moreno is from Venezuela, of course, and it appears that he, unlike some Venezuelans, he took his socialism with him. Not much respect for property rights, I suppose, in his opinion. But the funny part is that the Biden administration generally doesn't deport people. Yeah, there have been more deportations. I keep hearing this from the TDS sufferers. That's because there's a skyrocketing number of people coming in. So even if you're doing catch and release, you're also going to have more actual deportations. By the way, there's a difference between the number of people crossing the border illegally and the number of border encounters, because you don't always encounter them. There's some lies, damn lies, and statistics, some fuzzy math that goes on when we talk about these things. So the fact that ICE almost immediately acted to go after Moreno is rather telling, is it not? I think that the Biden admin immediately moved because they realized, shit, this is a symbol of how bad the border crisis has become. This is not going to go over well with people. This is going to be reported in the news. It's going to be unfortunate for us politically. We better get this guy off the streets as quickly as possible. Imagine how many ICE agents were mobilized to go after this one dude when there are people that are smuggling drugs and guns and stuff like that instead. No, they went after him because he had an audience and he happened to be vocal enough to go viral in the news. And by the way, that's the only real influence that he's had. His 15 minutes of fame didn't come because of the original content that he was making. It came because he was being so pernicious that the legacy media reported on him, along with a bunch of content creators, creating a nightmare for the Biden administration. Look, everyone already knows there's a border crisis, but when things like Martha's Vineyard busing, armies of Haitians, and people like Moreno, when that starts happening, people push back. It's sort of a doppelganger of the critical race theory / wokeness in school thing. There were those of us who were already talking about it for years, that there was a problem in public education wherein it was being intellectually coercive and undermining actual political discourse in favor of basically a one-sided view of the world, an authoritarian view of the world. But when people started hearing specifically about critical race theory, and when it was popularized and actually made the news, all of a sudden people showed up at the school board meetings and they were enlightened to the fact that their kids were being taught the same thing. I think a lot of small town Americans figured, that happens in San Francisco. These goofy far-righters, they're just being hyperbolic. This is San Francisco and New York's problem. It's not going to happen here in Tallahassee. Then they realized it was happening in Tallahassee, and the rest was history. The Dems had to abandon the term critical race theory, and now they prefer other terminology for their communism in school shtick. The same thing is true of the border crisis. People knew it was a problem, but until much more recently, it was conceived of as a problem for the southern states by and large. Well, now people in Chicago, New York, Philadelphia, and elsewhere, they understand it's a problem too. People in Martha's Vineyard were very shaken when only a small load, about 70 people, showed up on their island and said, oh my God, well, all of a sudden, I don't have the, I rent these rooms out. I can't let, random migrants stay there. I won't make any money off of that. You know, these properties are expensive, that's the whole point. NIMBYism, a bunch of people that like to put their heads in the sand until the problem shows up on their doorstep, and then it's really a problem. He fucked around and found out. Only a complete idiot at this point. Maybe back in the day you could get away with saying and doing illegal things online. That is not this current time. Had these videos been made in 2008, you know, he would have escaped punishment probably and notice. Also probably never would have made it in the much more competitive and much more intellectual environment of discourse back then. Whereas now, basically, yeah, here's a 60-second video where I flash some money at you and make weird faces. And the dude looks like he comes from Jersey Shore for some reason. I don't exactly understand it. So he's been nabbed by ICE. So now he'll have to pay back some of the Benji Greens that he stole from the U.S. taxpayers, maybe. And they'll marry him on his fucking way. Yeah, they'll probably deport him because he's actually a problem. Not a problem in the sense of the larger issue of border crisis or illegal immigration. Biden clearly doesn't care about that. Until, you know, the last month, he didn't even admit that there was a crisis at the border. Everyone else already knew it. He pretended there wasn't, and he was hoping it would go away. When it didn't, he had to address it. And this is because it's a political problem for the administration. The optics of this happening are very poor. So somehow it only took him a few days to track this individual down. Very interesting. All other times they just disappear and there's no way to possibly find them. You know, like the 1/3 of unaccompanied minors that have disappeared into the woodwork in the country. Which is like, you know, 13,000 kids being currently trafficked or worked to death in sweatshops and stuff like that. Or both. Or they're just, you know, they're being basically held hostage by somebody unsavory. That's what's happening. You know, you can imagine some drug gang gets a hold of, you know, some 12-year-old and then writes back to the family back in Mexico City, hey, you want to see your kid again? Pony up some money or I'm going to use him as a drug mule. That sounds fair. I mean, if he brings cocaine across in his ass a couple of times, we'll just call it even and I'll let him go. You know, I might recapture him and do the same thing again later because it's amusing to some of these people, but, you know, it's all good. This happens all the time. But it's only really a problem when it negatively impacts the Biden administration. It's like Eric Adams, who the other day was being lambasted by a bunch of pro-Biden DNC shill bot accounts on Twitter. He comes out and says, well, this border crisis is actually a problem and I'm calling for a solution. Now, he's being a hypocrite. He's only doing it for politically self-serving reasons. What happened when he first came out and did that? He immediately got raided by the feds. His campaign manager got raided by the feds a fucking week after his original statements lambasting the Biden administration's lack of focus on the border. A few weeks later, he gets raided by the feds. I mean, put two and two together, this is not a coincidence. That's why Leonel Moreno actually is going to be deported. They're going to kick him out of the country or detain him for an extended period of time. That's because he became politically inconvenient. He fucked around and he found out. That's about all. Peace out.